stood in the cargo bay of the transport ship, watching the stars pass by through the small window. He was 34 years old, a trained chef from Earth who had worked in the finest restaurants across 3 continents, but none of that mattered now. He was heading to Station Omega-9, a neutral trading post floating in the space between 3 hostile alien territories. The Galactic Council had hired him for what they called an impossible mission. They wanted him to cook. The situation was simple to explain but terrifying to think about. 3 alien species had been at war for over 200 years. There were reptilian warriors with scales like armor, and a society built entirely on honor and combat. There were insect-like beings who communicated through chemical signals and considered all other species to be beneath them. There were tall, thin creatures with 6 arms and minds that processed information faster than any computer. These 3 civilizations controlled vast portions of the galaxy, and their constant fighting had killed billions. Peace talks had failed 17 times. Ambassadors from neutral worlds had tried everything. Nothing worked. The hatred between these species ran deeper than politics or territory. It was personal. It was cultural. It was in their blood. Then someone on the Galactic Council had a strange idea. They noticed that every failed peace talk had one thing in common. The different species could never eat together. They considered the food disgusting and poisonous. They found cuisine to be offensive to their chemical senses. They believed that sharing food with lesser species was beneath their dignity. Without shared meals, there could be no trust. Without trust, there could be no peace. That is where came in. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were not the strongest species. They were not the oldest or the most advanced. But humans had one ability that confused and amazed every alien civilization. They could eat almost anything. Human digestive systems were remarkably flexible. Human taste buds were incredibly sensitive. And humans had spent thousands of years developing the art of cooking into something that no other species had ever matched. Had studied alien cuisine for 5 years. He had traveled to colonies and learned to prepare their traditional blood soups and fire-roasted meats. He had visited hive worlds and discovered the complex chemistry behind their nectar-based dishes. He had spent 2 years on a research station, analyzing the mathematical precision they applied to their crystalline food preparations. He had earned the respect of cooks from all 3 species, though none of them knew he was learning from their enemies as well. The transport ship docked at Station Omega-9 and stepped onto the platform with his bags of equipment. The station was enormous, a wheel of metal and glass spinning slowly in the darkness of space. It was designed to be neutral territory, a place where the 3 species could meet without fighting. Armed guards from a dozen neutral species patrolled the corridors. Weapons were forbidden, but that had not stopped the violence. There had been 7 incidents in the past month alone. The council representative who greeted him was a small being with skin and large black eyes. Her name was, and she explained the situation as they walked through the station. The peace summit would begin in 3 days. Representatives from all 3 species would attend. Had to prepare a meal that all 3 could eat together. If he succeeded, it might create the foundation for actual negotiations. If he failed, the summit would collapse and the war would continue. Asked to see the kitchen, led him to a large room filled with equipment from 3 different civilizations. There were flame pits that could reach temperatures hot enough to melt steel. There were chemical processors that could combine substances at the molecular level. There were precision instruments that could measure ingredients down to the individual atom. No one had ever tried to use all 3 systems together. The previous cooks had all given up within hours. He spent the first day simply studying. He examined every piece of equipment. He tested every ingredient that had been provided. They had sent their finest cuts of meat from creatures he could not pronounce. They had provided chemical compounds that changed color when he touched them. They had delivered crystallized nutrients that seemed to vibrate with their own internal energy. None of these things should work together. The chemicals would destroy the meat. The crystals would poison the compounds. Everything seemed designed to fail. But had not come unprepared. He had brought ingredients from Earth, spices and herbs and oils that had been cultivated by human hands for thousands of years. He had brought soy sauce and olive oil and garlic and ginger. He had brought honey and vinegar and salt from the ancient seas. These simple ingredients had one thing that alien foods lacked. They were neutral. They belonged to no faction. They carried no political weight. They were just food. On the second day, began to experiment. He discovered that meat, when properly prepared, had a rich flavor similar to earth beef but with a deeper, more complex taste. The key was controlling the temperature. Flame pits were designed for warriors who liked their food burned black, but if he reduced the heat and cooked slowly, the meat became tender and full of flavor. The chemicals were more difficult. They reacted violently to heat and seemed to reject any attempt to combine them with other ingredients. But notice something interesting. When he added small amounts of earth honey to the mixture, the chemicals stabilized. The sweetness of the honey created a buffer that allowed the compounds to blend with other flavors without destroying them. The crystals were the greatest challenge. They were designed to be eaten pure, without any alteration. They believed that cooking was a form of corruption. They consumed their nutrients in precise measured doses, caring nothing for taste or pleasure, but discovered that when he ground the crystals into fine powder and mixed them with olive oil from earth, they formed a smooth paste that enhanced the flavors of other ingredients without overpowering them. By the end of the second day, had developed 3 prototype dishes. The first was a soup that combined meat with chemical bases and crystal powder, all balanced with earth spices. The second was a solid preparation, almost like a steak, that layered flavors from all 3 cuisines into something entirely new. The third was a dessert, a sweet creation that used nectar, nutrients, and earth fruits to create something that no alien had ever tasted before. But cooking was only half the challenge. Knew that the alien representatives would never eat food that smelled wrong to them. They could detect chemicals in their food from across a room. They processed the world primarily through scent. They analyzed everything with their advanced senses before consuming it. One wrong smell, and the entire meal would be rejected before anyone took a single bite. Worked through the night, adjusting his recipes. He learned that certain earth herbs could mask the scents that they found offensive in food. He discovered that crystal powder, when heated correctly, produced an aroma that they found surprisingly pleasant. He found that chemical compounds could be processed to remove the toxins that made them dangerous to digestion. Everything connected. Everything worked together. It just needed the right cook to see the connections. The morning of the summit arrived. Stood in the kitchen, surrounded by his creations. Came to check on him, her large eyes wide with concern. She asked if he was ready. He told her that he was as ready as he would ever be. She nodded and left to prepare the meeting room. The alien representatives arrived separately, as tradition demanded. The delegation was led by a massive warrior named, who had personally killed over 100 and in battle. He looked at the dining table with obvious suspicion. They sent their high chemist, a being called Primessence 7, who communicated through complex clouds of pheromones. The translator device could barely keep up with her rapid chemical speech. The representative was a scientist named Theorist of Connections, who immediately began scanning the room with his advanced sensors. For a long moment, no one moved. The hatred in the room was almost visible. These beings had lost family members to each other. They had burned each other's worlds. They had spent generations teaching their children to fear and hate the other species, and now they were expected to eat together like friends. Entered the room carrying the first course. The soup steamed gently in bowls that he had designed specifically for this moment. Each bowl was shaped to accommodate the eating methods of each species. The bowl had a wide opening for their powerful jaws. The bowl had a narrow spout for their feeding tubes. The bowl had measurement markings that showed the precise nutritional content. Growled deep in his throat. He asked what kind of trick this was, explained in simple terms that this was fusion cuisine. It combined the best elements of all 3 culinary traditions. It was not food or food or food. It was something new, something that belonged to no one and everyone. Primescence 7 released a burst of skeptical chemicals. The translator interpreted her message as doubt. She said that her species did not eat with prey, responded that there was no prey in this room. There were only guests at his table. In his kitchen, everyone was equal. Everyone was welcome. Everyone deserved good food. Theorist of Connections scanned the soup with his instruments. His 6 arms moved rapidly as he processed the information. After a long moment, he announced that the chemical composition was safe for all 3 species. There were no toxins. There were no hidden dangers. It was just food. But no one moved to eat. The political weight of the moment was too heavy. Whoever ate first would be showing weakness. Whoever ate first would be trusting the enemy. Picked up a bowl himself. He raised it to his lips and drank. The soup was delicious, the best thing he had ever created. The flavors danced on his tongue, complex and satisfying. He finished the bowl and set it down. Then he waited. Moved first. The warrior grabbed his bowl and drank it in 3 massive gulps. His eyes widened. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he spoke a single word in his native language. The translator rendered it as beautiful. Primescence 7 was next. She inserted her feeding tube into the bowl and consumed the soup slowly, analyzing every chemical with her advanced senses. When she finished, she released a cloud of pheromones that the translator struggled to interpret. The closest translation was unexpected joy. Theorist of Connections ate last. He measured each sip carefully, recording the experience with scientific precision. When he finished, he set down his bowl and looked at with an expression that might have been wonder. He said that the mathematical harmony of the flavors was unprecedented. He had never experienced anything like it. The main course followed, then the dessert. The 3 enemies ate together in silence, savoring every bite. When the meal was finished, something had changed. The hatred was still there, buried deep. The memories of war remained, but something new had grown alongside them, a shared experience, a common pleasure, a moment of peace around a table. The peace talks that followed were not easy. They lasted for months and nearly collapsed several times. But whenever tensions rose too high, whenever the old hatreds threatened to destroy everything, would prepare another meal. He would bring the enemies together at his table. He would remind them that they were capable of sharing something good. The final peace treaty was signed 1 year later. It included a provision that surprised everyone. It mandated the creation of a galactic culinary exchange, a program that would train cooks from all 3 species to prepare fusion cuisine. The program was named after the human chef who had started everything. The initiative became the foundation of lasting peace. Himself returned to Earth eventually. He opened a small restaurant in the city where he was born. It served fusion cuisine from 3 alien civilizations, adapted for human tastes. The restaurant was always full. People came from across the world to taste the food that had ended a war. And sometimes, on quiet nights, would look up at the stars and think about the dining table on Station Omega 9. He would remember the moment when 3 ancient enemies had shared a meal together. He would remember the power of good food, prepared with skill and offered with love. He would remember that peace was possible, even between those who had forgotten how to hope. That was the legacy of the human chef, not just recipes or techniques or fancy presentations, but the simple truth that every species in the universe needed to eat. And when they ate together, when they shared the pleasure of good food, they remembered that they were not so different after all. They remembered that they were all just beings trying to survive in a vast and lonely universe. They remembered that enemies could become friends if someone was brave enough to set the table and invite them to sit down. The war between the and the ended because of many factors. Political pressure, economic necessity, and simple exhaustion all played their parts. But at the heart of everything was a human who believed in the power of cooking, a chef who saw food as more than just nutrition, a man who understood that a shared meal was the beginning of trust, and trust was the beginning of peace. Humanity had given the galaxy many things: technology and art and philosophy and war. But perhaps the greatest gift was the simplest one: the gift of the table, the gift of the meal, the gift of sitting down together and breaking bread. It was a gift that the other species had never thought to give each other, and it changed everything.